There is a line of thought whispered among mystics, tucked between the faded pages of forgotten manuscripts, and murmured in the halls of ancient monasteries. What if Jesus, in one of the earliest collections of his sayings, never once prayed to the Father? Not because he was defiant, not because he was distant, but because he was revealing a secret far older than any church creed. Tonight, we step into that mystery. Imagine this: a desert night, silent except for the wind sliding across the sand. A small circle of disciples leans closer to hear their teacher's voice. Not the Jesus sculpted by centuries of doctrine, but the fierce, enigmatic sage captured in the Gospel of Thomas. No miracles to dazzle the crowds, no sermons aimed at the masses, only pure transmission. Wisdom meant for those ready to see. And yet, in this text, one of the most provocative pieces of early Christian mysticism, Jesus never lifts his eyes to heaven and calls upon the Father. He never pleads, never petitions, not once. Why? Was it an omission, a lost detail, or was it intentional, an esoteric clue pointing to a very different understanding of the divine? One that does not rely on separation, hierarchy, or distance. In this video, we will descend into the hidden chambers of meaning behind this mystery. We'll explore why the Gospel of Thomas presents a Jesus who does not pray upward to the Father, but instead urges his listeners to look inward. We'll uncover how this omission flips conventional theology on its head, revealing something that early institutions may have found too dangerous, too liberating, or simply too radical to preserve. By the time we finish, you may never see prayer, divinity, or even Jesus himself the same way again. Because this is not just about an ancient text. This is about the secret architecture of consciousness and the forgotten keys that can awaken it. If you're ready to step beyond the familiar stories and into the deeper currents of esoteric Christianity, stay with me. The hidden path begins here. To understand why Jesus never prays to the Father in the Gospel of Thomas, we must first step back, far back, into a time before Christian doctrine was a system, before councils, before creeds, before empires adopted a religion and reshaped its contours. We must return to an era when teachings were fluid, diverse, and encoded in layers that only the prepared could unravel. The Gospel of Thomas is not a narrative. It tells no stories, records no miracles, and provides no chronology. Instead, it is a collection of sayings, 114 cryptic utterances attributed to Jesus, preserved by a mystical community that valued direct spiritual insight over external authority. Found in 1945 among the Nag Hammadi texts in Egypt, the manuscript shocked scholars because it portrayed a Jesus who felt closer to a Zen master than a miracle-working savior. Unlike the canonical Gospels, Thomas contains no scenes where Jesus withdraws to pray, cries out to heaven, or addresses God as Father in petition or surrender. This absence is not accidental. The Jesus of Thomas teaches self-discovery, inner illumination, and direct gnosis, knowledge of the divine spark residing within each person. His message is not pray to the Father, but know what is before your face, and what is hidden from you will be revealed. To grasp the significance of this, we must consider the world in which these teachings circulated. The 1st and 2nd centuries were a maelstrom of competing interpretations of Jesus' life and message. Some groups emphasized faith, obedience, and divine intervention. Others, often labeled Gnostic by later critics, emphasized awakening, inner revelation, and the dissolution of spiritual ignorance. The community behind Thomas belonged to this second stream. For them, divinity was not distant. God was not above. The ultimate source was not something to be pleaded with, but uncovered, revealed, remembered. Prayer in the conventional sense implied separation, and separation was the illusion they sought to dissolve. This worldview did not arise in a vacuum. Egypt, where the text was found, had long been a crossroads of mystical traditions. Hermeticism, early Judaism, Hellenistic philosophy, and echoes of ancient temple wisdom. The idea that the divine dwells within, and that enlightenment comes from piercing the veil of ignorance, was central to these traditions. The Jesus of Thomas seems to stand in continuity with this lineage, offering insights not to build a religion, but to awaken a consciousness. It is no surprise that such teachings were eventually overshadowed. As Christianity expanded, institutional structures favored texts emphasizing communal worship, external authority, and theological clarity. A Jesus who instructed followers to seek the kingdom within and discover that they were children of the living Father, without intercessors or rituals. This was far too radical, far too ungovernable. Thus, Thomas slipped into obscurity, preserved only in scattered communities until it vanished altogether for over 1,000 years. And now, with its rediscovery, we face a question that has echoed since the sands of Egypt yielded this manuscript. What is the meaning of a Jesus who does not pray upward, but instead calls us inward? To answer that, we must go deeper, into the symbolic architecture of the sayings themselves, and into the inner landscape they were designed to illuminate. To understand why Jesus never prays to the Father in the Gospel of Thomas, we must begin with the heart of its message, a teaching so subtle, so paradoxical, that it dissolves the need for prayer as most people understand it. In Thomas, Jesus speaks not as an intermediary, but as an awakener. He does not position himself between humanity and God. He does not point upward. He points inward, relentlessly, consistently, almost urgently. And this is where the first great key emerges. Key 1. The Father is not out there. The Father is the source within. Throughout Thomas, Jesus declares that the kingdom is inside of you and outside of you. Not above, not far, not accessible through supplication, sacrifice, or ritual. When disciples ask where they should seek the divine, he answers with riddles that lead back to one place, the inner realm where consciousness meets its origin. If the divine is not external, prayer as a request loses its meaning. If the Father is already present, prayer as an appeal becomes obsolete. Instead, what remains is recognition, awakening, remembrance. This is the essence of the Thomas tradition. You do not pray to the Father. You awaken as the Father's expression. Jesus is not modeling petition. He is modeling realization. Key 2. Separation is the true illusion. In canonical texts, prayer often reinforces a dynamic of distance, human below, God above. But in Thomas, Jesus dismantles this structure entirely. His teachings use imagery that collapses all sense of division. When you know yourselves, you will be known. You are from the kingdom. The Father is living in you. If you accept these statements literally or symbolically, they overturn the foundation of traditional prayer. Thomas portrays a cosmology in which separation is the only thing that blinds the seeker. Once the illusion of separation dissolves, the seeker realizes that the divine presence has never been elsewhere. In such a worldview, prayer becomes unnecessary, not discouraged, but irrelevant. You do not call to what you already are. Key 3. Jesus as a mirror, not a mediator. The Jesus of Thomas is not a savior asking followers to rely on him. He is a mirror urging them to see their own divine nature. He repeatedly challenges his disciples to understand their origin, identity, and power. When they ask him questions, he responds not with comfort, but with disturbance, forcing them to confront their own blindness. This version of Jesus does not pray on their behalf, because his entire message is built on the premise that they must awaken themselves. He states plainly, if your leaders say, "Look, the kingdom is in heaven," then the birds will get there first. If they say, "It is in the sea," the fish will precede you. No external place, no external God, no externalized prayer. Instead, he directs them toward the luminous center of their own being. Key 4. Prayer is replaced by presence. In Thomas, the act that replaces prayer is not petition, it is presence. A quiet, piercing awareness, a remembering of one's own light, a sinking back into the source of being. The text gives subtle hints about this shift. Jesus speaks of becoming single, of making the inner like the outer, the above like the below. These are instructions for integration, not intercession. The seeker in Thomas is not someone who asks, but someone who perceives, someone who aligns their inner world so completely that the divine is not reached, it is revealed. The uneasy implication: if Jesus in Thomas does not pray, it is not because he denies the Father. It is because he embodies the Father's presence so fully that prayer, as a gesture of reaching outward, no longer makes sense. And this is where the text begins to unsettle modern readers. Because if the divine is already within, then who are we when we stop asking and start remembering? What happens when we no longer imagine ourselves as distant from the source? What power returns to us when we dissolve the last layer of separation? These are the questions Thomas quietly plants like seeds, seeds that awaken only in the minds of those who are ready to look inward with honesty and courage. Part 1 lays the foundation. Part 2 takes us deeper into the paradoxes, the hidden meanings, and the profound implications most overlook. To go deeper, we must probe the paradoxes the Gospel of Thomas lays before us. Paradoxes that reveal why Jesus never prays to the Father in this text, and why this absence is not a flaw, but a doorway. If Part 1 uncovered the inner nature of the Father, Part 2 reveals something even more controversial. In the world of Thomas, prayer is not an act of devotion. It is a symptom of forgetting. This does not mean devotion is wrong. It means devotion is transformed. It shifts from worshiping the divine to becoming conscious of it. And this shift runs through the entire structure of Thomas, like an underground river. 1. The divine as a hidden twin. One of the most striking statements in Thomas is Jesus' insistence that his disciples find their true self, their hidden twin. This concept appears in multiple sayings and echoes the mystical traditions of Egypt, Persia, and early Jewish mysticism. The twin represents the divine image within you, the part of you that never left the source. In this framework, to pray outwardly would be like speaking to your own reflection, as if it were a stranger. The text pushes the seeker toward inner recognition rather than outer dialogue. Jesus says, "When you make the two one, then you will enter the kingdom." This is not the language of petition. This is the language of reunion. 2. The Father is found in the uncarved space. In Thomas, Jesus speaks of the Father not through titles or rituals, but through silence and simplicity. He urges the disciples to become passers-by, to drop attachments, and to see with unclouded vision. This type of teaching implies a kind of interior stillness, a state in which prayer would not be a request, but an alignment. It mirrors Eastern spiritual traditions, where enlightenment is not achieved by calling upon a higher being, but by dissolving the false self enough to perceive the truth. The Father, in this sense, is discovered in the space between thoughts, between breaths, in the uncarved stillness of awareness. If Jesus were to perform traditional prayer in Thomas, he would contradict his own teaching. For him, the Father was not beyond the sky, but within his very breath. 3. the radical self-sovereignty of the seeker. One reason Thomas was marginalized is because it threatens hierarchical religion. Institutions rely on intermediaries, priests, rituals, scriptures, structures. But Thomas undermines that entire framework by presenting a Jesus who hands spiritual sovereignty back to the individual. He says, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me." Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. These are not promises given through worship or prayer. They are invitations to awareness, to interpretation, to direct knowing. A Jesus who never prays upward is a Jesus who never teaches dependence. He teaches transformation. 4. The absence of the Father as an external character. Now comes a subtle but powerful observation. In Thomas, the Father is mentioned, but never as a separate figure. The Father is not a character who acts independently. The Father is not someone Jesus reports to. The Father is not someone he tries to persuade. Instead, the Father is a condition, a state of being, a dimension of consciousness, a presence revealed through inner clarity. This framing leaves no room for the type of prayer we find in other Gospels. Thomas is concerned not with relationship, but with realization. 5. The paradox of silence. In many mystical texts, silence is more powerful than speech. In Thomas, Jesus frequently answers questions with riddles, challenges, or cryptic statements that force the listener inward. The absence of his prayers is itself a teaching, a silence that speaks louder than words. Just as a master pianist may choose not to play a note to emphasize the surrounding music, Jesus' silence on prayer emphasizes the presence he embodies. This is the paradox. His lack of prayer is itself the teaching. He does not pray because he is the prayer, the living alignment, the quiet flame that needs no fuel. 6. The invitation hidden in the omission. And so, the omission becomes an invitation. Thomas does not want you to watch Jesus pray. Thomas wants you to make the journey yourself, to discover the Father not through the words of another, but through the realization that has been waiting in you since the beginning. The absence of outward prayer directs your gaze inward, into your own consciousness, into your own light, into your own source. It whispers, "You are not separate. Remember." This is the heart of the mystery, the reason Jesus never prays to the Father in Thomas. The text is not suppressing something, it is revealing something, something transformative, something dangerous, something liberating. And now, we move from concept to practice. How to actually apply this inner approach to prayer and presence in your own life. Now that we've explored the mystery, the symbolism, and the philosophy, we arrive at the part that matters most to your everyday life. How do you apply the Thomas approach to prayer? How do you move from petition to presence, from asking to awakening? Because the Gospel of Thomas isn't meant to be admired, it's meant to be activated. Its teachings are living codes, and their power awakens only when practiced. Let's walk through the core principles and the exercises that bring them to life. 1. Replace asking with remembering. The first shift is subtle but life-changing. Instead of praying upward, asking a distant Father for guidance, healing, or clarity, Thomas invites you to turn inward and remember the source already within you. Try this practice. The Inner Flame exercise, 3 minutes daily. Sit comfortably. Place your attention in the center of your chest, not imagining anything, simply sensing. Breathe slowly and repeat inwardly. What I seek is already here. Allow your awareness to settle, like dust falling in water. This is not a mantra of wishful thinking. It is a reminder that the peace, clarity, and direction you seek are internal states, not external gifts. With time, you'll notice that many of your questions begin answering themselves, not because something out there finally spoke, but because you finally quieted enough to hear. 2. Cultivate single-minded presence. One of the most famous sayings in Thomas speaks of becoming single. This refers to a unified state of consciousness, no inner conflict, no scattered attention, no division within oneself. To cultivate this, the one breath practice. Throughout the day, pause for a single conscious breath. During that breath, let your attention gather itself fully. No past, no future, just presence. It sounds simple, but this micro-practice rewires your awareness. It shifts you from separation to unity, one breath at a time. Over weeks, you'll begin to notice moments of clarity and connection appearing spontaneously, as if the deeper self is finally breaking through the noise. 3. Embrace silence as a form of prayer. In Thomas, Jesus rarely answers directly. His silence or half-answers force the listener inward. This is a cue for your own practice. Instead of praying with words, try praying with stillness. The empty chair ritual. Sit facing an empty chair. Imagine the Father, not as a being, but as the stillness that fills the space. Instead of speaking, listen. Instead of asking, receive. This practice helps you sense the presence that Thomas points to, the quiet, spacious awareness behind your thoughts. 4. Seek the twin. Meet the higher self. The twin in Thomas refers to the divine image within you. Connecting with it brings guidance, intuition, and profound self-trust. The mirror practice. Look into a mirror, not at your face, but into your eyes. Ask softly, what part of me is older than my story? Don't analyze, just observe what arises. This helps unlock the deeper layers of identity, the parts untouched by fear, trauma, or conditioning. 5. Act from the kingdom state. Thomas teaches that the kingdom is already inside you. To embody this, you must practice acting from inner fullness rather than inner lack. Pick one situation today, just one, in which you would normally react from fear, insecurity, or doubt. Before responding, pause and ask, if I remembered my inner light right now, what would I do? Then act from that answer. This is how inner awakening becomes outer transformation. These practices are not meant to replace your spiritual path, but to refine it, to help you move from seeking to knowing, from distance to intimacy, from praying to embodying. Now that you've tasted the applied side of this wisdom, we can bring the journey home. As we come to the end of this journey, take a moment to feel the shift inside you. The subtle but unmistakable movement from outward searching to inward knowing. What began as a question about an ancient text has unfolded into something far more personal, more intimate, and more transformative. We explored why Jesus, in the Gospel of Thomas, never prays to the Father, and the answer was not an omission, not an accident, but a revelation. A revelation that the divine is not a distant presence but an inner reality. A revelation that prayer is not a plea but a remembering. A revelation that the kingdom is not above you, but within you, pulsating, waiting, inviting. The Jesus of Thomas doesn't model how to reach outward. He models how to awaken inward. He teaches not dependence but sovereignty, not worship but realization, not separation but unity. And now, this mystery is no longer hidden in desert caves or monastery vaults. It has reached you. The deeper question becomes, what will you do with it? Will you treat it as an interesting idea, a curiosity, a piece of spiritual trivia, or will you let it shift something inside you? Some old pattern, some inherited belief, some assumption about who you are and where the divine truly lives. Because the moment you stop reaching outward for what you already carry within, your entire inner landscape begins to change. Your decisions shift. Your reactions soften. Your intuition grows clearer. You move with the confidence of someone who has remembered their origin. That is the gift of Thomas. Not answers, awareness, not doctrines, direction, not dogma, awakening. So as you leave this video, carry this with you. You are not separate. You have never been separate. And the moment you turn inward with sincerity, the Father, the Source, the Light, the Origin, reveals itself in the quiet chamber of your own being. If this journey stirred something in you, let me know in the comments. Share what resonated, what challenged you, what opened inside you. And if you're ready for more explorations into hidden wisdom and ancient truths, make sure you're subscribed. Because this path, this inner path, is only just